Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. This is BaconLord, and with me is Yorongoth and Erebus. Welcome to the first ever Apokolips Productions, and today we're going to be talking about Green Lantern on our first ever Toon Talk.
Hello, I'm Erebus.
Hello. Hello, I'm Yorongoth.
Alright.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good, man. Alright, so let's get talking about Green Lantern. I think we're going to start with just going through his abilities today, and then we're going to talk about how to use him in the early and mid games, as well as just how useful he is. Sound good, everyone?
Sounds good to me.
Absolutely.
Let's get going.
Perfect. So I'm just gonna read off those abilities. For those of us that are not familiar with the ranking system, just so you're aware, the first two abilities stop at level 7 below level 50, which is what we are using to base an early game estimate off of, and the last three abilities stop at level 6. So just to know where we're getting some of our numbers from today. All right, I'm gonna dive into these abilities real quick. So the first ability, Power Gauntlet, does damage to an enemy, applies 19% shield to a random teammate, and calls assist if Green Lantern is shielded. That is at level 7, so those are the exact numbers. He does 24% shield at full power. Strength of Will, his second ability, gain 45% shield or 35% shield at level 7, and 25% turn meter up, as well as apply 10% shield to all teammates, and his legendary, when Strength of Will is used, reduce the cooldown of all abilities by 1. His third ability is Hammer Time, which is a heavy special damage ability to an enemy. It applies stun if Green Lantern is shielded, and when legendary, Hammer Time can't miss and purges 10 buffs from the target. His fourth ability, Hard Light. Hard Light is a passive ability, and at the beginning of each enemy's turn, 60% chance to gain 1 agility up and 1 intelligence up if Green Lantern is not shielded, and he also gains 10% shield when it's at legendary, and that is at level 6, so the real numbers at level 8 are 70%. And the greatest Green Lantern is his team leader ability, so only when he's in that team leader slot, he will apply 1 debuff immunity and 26% shield to all allies at the start of the battle, and that is also at level 6, so those are the actual numbers for below level 50. When he passes level 50, it's 35% shield to start, and his legendary adds an extra debuff immunity to all allies to start the battle. Gosh, I have not spoken that fast in a while.
Well, you did a great job, and thank you for reading all of that.
Of course.
Why don't we take a moment and go through and just talk about what makes Hal Jordan a good toon?
Well, for starters, he's one of the only characters you get to start the game with.
That's a pretty good first step.
That's pretty good reason to think of him as a decent toon.
He's also a leader from the outset. Actually, I think a number of the toons that you get from the outset are leaders, because you get him and Zatanna to start, and then
they're both leaders.
And then I think you get
Deadshot.
So you start the game with one leader of each type, and of the three, I would say he's probably the most useful.
I mean, I think for sure, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, he's probably the only one that that I would personally take into the late game, but for early game, he's probably got the most useful team lead ability of a character that you're just gonna get handed over. I don't know if y'all would agree with that, but that's how I've perceived him.
That team leader one is the one that gives the debuff immunity at start.
Yes. And honestly, he's really your only utility supporting toon that you get for a while. Because I know you're handed Batman CC as well, which we'll talk about in another upcoming episode, and Deadshot Higher Gun, which are more striker characters, and Zatanna, who is your go-to healer to start the game. But I think, if I recall correctly, Green Lantern should be the only early game support character that you get for a while.
I believe you're correct there. And one thing that I really like about his kit in regards to its supporting ability is his hammer time, because it's one of the early stuns that you get, which is effective at making sure you're able to stay alive longer.
Mm-hmm.
He's also
Well, also, oh,
Thank
you go.
He's also a really good tank. He can soak up damage really well from the start all the way up to the late game.
Well, and also he's gaining agility ups, which is just increasing that.
The int ups make
tankiness.
it so that he takes less damage from special attacks.
Yep. So he's reduced damage from physical and special attacks, which is super. I don't know many tunes that do that, besides Green Lantern.
Yeah. And the shield.
Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, to be very clear.
And the shield on top of that.
Oh, definitely, yeah. The only thing he's missing as a tank really is a taunt. Just something to pull attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I bet say even without his legendary abilities, he's probably he's definitely a very, very good early game character. Because just going through it, shield, damage, stun, both physical and special damage.
Yeah.
Agility ups, intelligence ups, more shield.
Applying shield to his teammates on his basic just gives him so much utility right out the gate.
I remember when I was starting out many moons ago, and I was using Green Lantern, his basic a lot, because you're early game, the rounds go a lot longer, and I remember I didn't read the character ability descriptions. I just kind of ran with it and hoped that everything worked out. I kept using his basic, and I kept wondering where this shield was coming from, because I think it was him and Flash all the time. And I kept using his basic, and Flash would get shield. I was like, why is Flash getting shield? Okay, whatever. And so I finally started investigating Flash's abilities to find where shield was in his abilities, because I didn't read Green Lanterns. And so I eventually figured it out, because I read and was smart for 5 seconds. But until then, I was wondering where I was getting, 10% shield every attack.
I definitely understand that. That's how I felt, not with Hal specifically, but with characters that have turned meter up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be jarring to see things happen on your tunes that you don't know where they came from and why they applied, and you don't even know what abilities to look for.
Yeah.
One early tip for anybody who is still in the early stages of the game. Hello, welcome. It's a wonderful community. You can hold down over any of the abilities that your characters have in battle, including their passives, and it will show you a tooltip to tell you what they do.
And also, just to not to bash on another game, but to point out a feature that I do like about DCL, instead of the Star Wars version, Galaxy of Heroes, the DCL lets you tap the abilities and change between them and hold them down to read them, and it doesn't attack your enemy. Whereas in that one, because I had started playing Star Wars one after playing DCL, so I'm used to just tapping and reading and holding and reading and holding and reading. I would click them to read them, and they would attack my enemy. I was like, wait, I didn't pick an enemy to hit. What's happening? And so I kept wasting turns.
Similar to Marvel Strike Force, which I played before this one. You choose your target first, and then you hit the ability that you want to use. So you go as soon as you hit the ability. So let me tell you the number of times that I just sat in DCL waiting for my characters to do what I wanted them to while tapping their ability. It was a lot at first. So
yeah. Okay, but back to Green Lantern. Back to Green Lantern.
The better game.
Yes, yeah, and not the movie. Let's not talk about that, please. Um, we, but yeah, no, he's super useful because he's a very well-rounded tank character for the early game, and you d- early game is a lot different than late game in the sense that late game you can take a team out in probably 3 hits, and the faster the match is over, the more likely you're going to win, unless you're the one getting creamed, which is a different issue. But early game is a lot more dragged out and a lot longer, so that's why healers and tunes that provide defense and specifically support like shields are super important. So the fact that Green Lantern provides shield with 1, 2, 3, 4 of his abilities is pretty important and useful.
Absolutely. And
That's a
yeah,
that's a really good point about shields and stuff being more useful early game, because once you get to late game, there are a lot of abilities and stuff that just negate shields altogether.
Yeah. I mean, you've got Shiva who purges an entire character's shield. Spectre just ignores them. And Spectre's kind of the meta right now, so it's kind of a big deal that you kind of adjust for that on times.
I mean, the other amazing thing is that it doesn't even require his legendary point for his 5 to apply a debuff immunity for 2 turns at the start of battle. That even late game, 2 turns of debuff immunity. This entire game runs on buffs and debuffs. So being able to take out debuff, to keep your team safe from debuffs is wild. That this is the first character that you get in the game.
Especially at turn 0. Because, like, you even have characters like... Well, Terra now has turn 0 debuff immunity, but it's only for 1 turn.
There's only 2 characters in the game that give this turn 0 debuff immunity, right? And
yeah, I can't think of another one.
And he's the first character you get. It's for free. It's incredible. It's such a strong ability. It kind of carries him as a leader all on its own. Now, it is worth noting, he is not that great off lead.
No, he needs to be leader, or he needs to be off your roster.
Or at the bare minimum, you need a team that provides shields before he goes. And his speed is not terrible. It's one, yeah.
No, he's got really good speed.
He's faster than a lot of tunes.
Most of the Green Lanterns have some decent speed.
So he needs shields to be able to do any of the rest of his kit. And if he's off lead, he's not giving himself that much shield. He'll give himself a bunch of shield with his 2, but that wastes a turn. So...
And you don't get his 4 to give you shield until you get him to legendary, which early game is hard enough battle as it is to get any tune to legendary.
So, great leader. Don't put him off lead if you're taking him in.
Yep.
Unless you have a very specific reason to do so.
And I think that's a good time to segue us into the mid game.
Yeah.
With him, because I think it's a very different. Well, it's a very similar but yet very different conversation once you get to mid game, because you've unlocked some more abilities of his, like the call assist if he's shielded, and specifically hammer time, which I think is the most useful of his legendaries. With that can't miss and 10 buff purge.
Yeah, absolutely.
On him.
Are we saying mid game is probably around L3?
Yeah, I think it's at least over. It has to at least be over L1, and before 70, because 70 is when you've started entering the late game, which is a very different game. And that's kind of, every other podcast talks about late game, and rarely touches on early game, and so that's kind of. This is new information. No one talks about mid game.
Yeah, that's why we're here. We want to provide you.
That's what we're doing.
We want to provide you a look into the early and mid game use for these tunes, even though I think we are all mid to late game players, we still want to make sure that this resource is available for you earlier players.
Exactly. New players.
To things that we didn't know.
You have to go through the mid and the early to get to the late game, so we've all experienced this.
These are things that we didn't necessarily know that we think would be helpful to you all. So we hope that you do find it useful.
Exactly.
So on that note, assuming legendary abilities are now a thing, I want to talk about how useless his 5th legendary ability is. Adding a second debuff immunity to that pile of 1 debuff immunity. It is probably one of the most useless legendaries in the game.
So there was a time when it was not terrible, and that was just because there were some things that could purge like 1 buff, and if you got rid of his debuff immunity, then the team was wide open. But
exactly,
things in the meta have moved so far that very rarely do you have a purge that only affects 1 buff on each enemy.
When you have to remember that Hal Jordan hasn't been changed in any way since May of 2019.
Wow.
That was his last rework.
Wow.
So he's from a very different version of this game.
Where he was... it was somewhat scary to bring him because if you had any other tune that then buffed, Wonder Girl would be whipping them into oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the extra debuff immunity, absolutely the last thing to take.
Yep. Well, and like just looking at the rest of them, they're just everything else is so much more useful. I mean, a 100% guaranteed call assist on if he's shielded, so not 100% guaranteed, but there's no chance if he has a shield on it. Unlike some that are like 50% chance if he's shielded, so it's a condition upon a condition, which just really hurts a character's ability. A cooldown, a cooldown reduction on his second one. Hammer time, obviously, I think Hammer time is his best legendary ability, but Power Gauntlet is right up there with it, with that can't miss and 10 buff purge, and Hard Light gaining 10% shield at the beginning of every enemy's turn if it procures the rest of the ability. Like that's a hard pass.
Yeah, his first 4 abilities are really quite strong. I mean, even his 4, the Hard Light one, gaining that 10% shield at the beginning of an enemy's turn, if it procs, that sets him up so that he can use either his Power Gauntlet or his Hammer time on his next turn without having to waste a turn doing his 2 to give himself actively shield.
Exactly.
So
you really can't go wrong with any of his first 4 abilities, but I do think that probably the order on DCToolkit.com is the right legendary order for him. It's his Hammer time first, so that it can't miss and purges 10 buffs from the target, especially because early game evasion tunes are the worst. They are the hardest thing. So can't miss and purge 10 buffs. You get rid of all of that evasion.
He's just a very versatile tune that you can apply to a number of situations. He's the perfect Harley Quinn counter.
Even so,
and he's excellent in a Harley Quinn Wonder Girl combination.
Yes.
Because I know the current solution is Terra in the late game, but if Wonder Girl's on the team, Terra's can't be a solution anymore to Harley Quinn.
Yeah. She will whip you to oblivion.
And not in the fun way.
Entirely fair.
All right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with Hal Jordan Green Lantern? He's super farmable, so like getting fragments and ranking him up is not a problem. He's way too easy to get fragments
I
for such a good character.
Yeah, exactly. I could not agree more.
absolutely. Yes, he's the first node of the heroic challenges. So after you complete chapter 1, that unlocks the heroic set of battles. So
The heroic campaign battles.
Thank you. He is the first node of that. So you can just sit there and farm him forever and ever and ever. I want to see how many shards of him I have. I have him.
I have over 13k.
That's impressive. I'm sitting at
I'm sorry, 1.3k. 1.3k. I can't do math.
Those are very different numbers.
It's a lot. Not that much.
Yeah,
Not that
I
much.
have him at.
He'd be Rebirth 5 by now if I had that much.
I have him at RB1 with 2,434 fragments.
Oh my god.
I've got him Rebirth 2 with 1.7k fragments left.
Yeah.
So I think what everyone can get from I have him at L4 by the way, so I'm not gonna talk about it because I haven't spent the 100k legendary essence to get him to L5 to Rebirth. But the point I think that you can take away from that is that he's very useful and he's very easy to farm. So get him before they change campaign again and decide to take him out because he's too good.
Exactly. All right.
Here.
And with that, I think we come to the close of our first episode.
Yes. So thank you anyone that's listening for joining us. And
I want to plug that you can find us online at apokolipspod.com. Of course, apocalypse is spelled the appropriate way, as the fourth world would dictate.
With a K for those who are not aware.
And the rest of the letters are weird. It's APO.
Yeah. It's how we spell it with the video and the podcast.
APOKOLIPS. Apokolipspod.com. Or on Twitter, also at apokolipspod.
Well, there you have it.
Thank you for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.